Y'all.
And joining us now, Joel Anand Samy and Natasha Srdoc. I think I said that right, Natasha?
Yes, you did. Great. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much. You guys are from, of course, America's Roundtable radio program, co-founder, International Leaders Summit. We got a lot going on here, Joel and Natasha. Let's talk first, if you don't mind, about this gigantic spending and tax bill that looks like the Democrats are taking a victory lap about in the House, headed over to the Senate now. We've been discussing that quite a bit on the program, but especially today, since it is now past the House. Your thoughts about this thing?
Well, first of all, Gerard and Rhino, thank you so much for having us on SuperTalk Mississippi this morning. And yes, indeed, you all have been following what has transpired here on Capitol Hill. And indeed, it is not a good day for America when we have such a massive tax and spending bill passing through. And we, as Americans, should be very concerned about the pathway forward.
Right. And
yeah. Go, please, Natasha, go ahead.
Right. If you put it in perspective, it's actually, we are now at $29 billion national debt. We have $2.8 billion deficit, which means actually the national debt is $87,000 per person, per citizen, right. $230,000 per taxpayer. And to that, we add a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which was passed into law this past week, and now $2 billion for climate and social spending, which is just, as you mentioned, is going to Senate. So based on Congressional Budget Office, they showed that the deficit will be added. So we have added deficit of some $367 billion in next 10 years. And that adds to previous infrastructure bill, which had Congressional Budget Office estimated $256 billion added for next 10 years. So this is terrible. At this stage, just looking at where we are, we shouldn't be spending any money. So we shouldn't have any bills on the table until we can go back to growth that we had pre-pandemic growth. We have unemployment at the level less than 3%. And that we don't have inflation as we have it now. We have 30-year record inflation, which is 6.5% or 6.1%, pardon.
Yeah.
And so, it doesn't look good. It's just going to be bad. I mean, just think about that. A child owes $87,000 today for national debt. If you proportionately pass it on to the new generation, or $230,000 per taxpayers.
It's mind-boggling, and what we have been highlighting on the program today, guys, is that the Democrats, including the Speaker, as recent as this morning, continues to push this narrative that this thing is so-called paid for, and you got the CBO who scores what is provided to them, which is nothing but an accounting gimmickry and a bunch of tricked up. We're going to expire this program on this date, but the taxes are going to stay in place for the duration of the 10-year scoring period. And so they have to score what they can. That's how they come up with $367 billion. But if they were honest about it and said, once we put these welfare programs in place, they don't go away. They're permanent. And if you scored it in accordance with that structure, you get a totally different number, like triple what the bill's cost is on its face value, and same for the deficit. Why can't they just tell the truth? I know it's a rhetorical question, but it is extremely frustrating to those of us who feel so powerless that we can't get the truth.
Right. And, to add to that is that in that bill, which they call Build Better bill, which is actually climate change or climate and social bill spending, because the largest individual portion is climate actually dedicated to some climate measures, which is $555 billion.
Yep.
And then you think two more things within this bill is that people are going to be spending more in and already paying higher prices at in gasoline stations, but also for the fuel. So 30% increase in fuel, which is going to be passed by the companies that are going to be paying more for the methane the taxes, actually, which is included in the bill. So people are paying more through as taxpayers for the bill, plus individual cost of increased heating for the winter time. And then there's another measure that was placed in it, hidden practically, is that they are actually requiring for illegal immigrants to get reauthorized working permits for 5 years and stop deportation for additional as well 5 years. So
Yeah.
it's deceitful. And I mean,
Right.
and that's why we're so frustrated. And where is that consent of the governed? Where is that government of, by, and for the people? Where are the people to say we don't approve of it? We don't want to spend that much money. We can't afford it. I mean, as families, we know we cannot spend more than we can earn because we're going to eventually go in bankruptcy. It just doesn't work. And,
What do you think is going to happen in the Senate? What do you think is going to happen in the Senate?
Well, I think it's so important for us to engage members of the Senate. This is not just a one-party issue. This is for all Americans. And it's incumbent upon us as Americans from the Midwest to the South, from the East and West, to engage members of the Senate and say, listen, folks, we, the American people, do not support this tax and spending bill. It is really going to bankrupt our country. At this very juncture, this crossroads that we're facing toward moving toward economic growth, which we'd like to, we're hit by this not transitory inflation, but it seems it appears to be more of a long-term stretched out inflation that we're experiencing. And as Natasha was mentioning, these measures in the bill are actually punitive measures toward small businesses and individuals that are creating jobs. So it is not going to be good for America. If we think that we have high prices now, with this new bill, as Natasha Srdoc mentioned just a moment ago, gas prices are going to even take an increase more than we have today, and as well as heating homes for this winter season. It is going to be at an all-time high. American families cannot afford that, especially those that are in the working poor category and families that are struggling at this moment with a single household. So these are the challenges we face. And in fact, you know, the phone lines in Washington, D.C. should be red hot right now. People should be calling members of the Senate and relaying not just only to Joe Manchin, but to leaders on both sides of the aisle and to senators saying, this is enough. We as Americans cannot back a tax and spend bill that will place our country at great economic risk.
Yeah, I totally agree. Joe Biden, of course, continues to spout the narrative that 17 Nobel Prize winning economists have all weighed in and said this thing is budget neutral or deficit neutral and also will not be inflationary. But how can any clear-thinking person, Joel, buy into that argument that dropping all this money in the economy is not inflationary?
Well, if they have communicated that these Nobel Prize winners have stated that, we would like to go to one of our mentors, one who supported our endeavors at the International Leaders Summit, none other than Milton Friedman, when he said, there is nothing such as a free lunch. And so at the end of the day, as even Margaret Thatcher was known to saying, you know, if socialists are pushing this, if progressives are pushing it, we will run out of money. And this is what we're facing today.
It's just mind-boggling to me that they could stand up in front of the American people and continue to spout all that nonsense, and people seem to, I guess, accept it. But we'll see what happens over in the Senate. And it's not just the financial aspect of this that is bothersome to me, but it's just anytime you have this explosion of the size of government, 87,000 new IRS agents being added under this measure. And all this, the climate court and all this other climate change stuff that's just going to expand the bureaucracy dramatically, that's just not good. It infringes on folks' freedom and their way of life. Nothing good comes out of that. Your thoughts?
Right. I mean, it's that's what the budget also CBO said, meaning the Biden was counting was on $480 billion to come out of the IRS tax enforcement measures, which would mean, I mean, where's that $480 billion now? I mean, it's if it is for high equity taxpayers, I mean, they have accountants and they have lawyers, they can defend themselves. But if they're planning to go after small guys, after entrepreneurs, small business leaders, what happened in Eastern Europe is that there was a financial police.
Pardon me, Natasha. Hold that thought. We got to take a break. We'll come right back. We'll continue this discussion. I want to talk about immigration as well as part of this stuff going on. Stay with us. We'll come right back. Days. Welcome back, everyone. Gerard and Rhino in the studio. Our guests on the line are Joel Anand Samy and Natasha Srdoc. They are the co-hosts of America's Roundtable radio program, co-founders of International Leaders Summit. So, Natasha, you were just talking about this this scheme that is included in the Build Back Better plan from a revenue provision perspective, where the crafters of the bill say that by adding IRS agents and enforcing tax laws, really what they're saying, that's the statement, they could generate some $400 billion over that 10-year period. CBO says that's more like $120 billion. My business instincts say that's probably more like half of $120 billion, if at all. I'm not sure there's any evidence that there's just this massive amount of tax, not avoidance, but evasion, which is illegal going on here. I'm not sold on that.
Right. Yeah, likewise. And that's what is troubling, as you mentioned earlier, to add IRS in 80,000 number is actually building a government oppressive coercive system. It's actually that was tried and it was done in Eastern Europe, where there's a financial police that is going to look for misspelling, little errors, and trying to get anything to penalize small taxpayers, which is the twofold. It's one thing, they're trying to get any money they can, because as you said, where are they going to get $480 billion? So to get any money, they're going to go after small and medium-sized and business entrepreneurs, actually. And well, with that enforcement, they're going to do also against political opponents. So it's very bad precedent. It's a building of coercive, oppressive government apparatus, which can be used for those two folds. And I don't think they're going to really, as you said, if they're going just for evasion, it's much better approach to do tax avoidance in order to get the base, much larger base with a smaller rate, generate the same or higher amount of tax revenues. And I'm not sure why they're not looking at that, because the tax policy should be actually in function of the growth. So to allow low taxes to grow faster, to grow wider, for everyone to grow at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's just I call it the pound of flesh message that seems to resonate and be popular with the Democrat basis, which is we just got to go shake down the most successful in society. That's the message that they convey. But we all know at the end of the day, that's just not what this is about, and that's not what will result. But 87,000 IRS agents, I can't see anything good coming out of that. And I think we're going to see lots of conflict and confrontation between honest tax-paying Americans and the IRS with that many agents. I just don't see how that's avoidable at this point. You know, something that bothers me, I think, more than anything, as I said, not just the spending aspect of this, Joel, Natasha, but this sort of transition of the role of government here to be more one of just your social safety net, your keeper, and not just protecting our borders, defending the nation, providing for common infrastructure, the core functions of government as laid out in our Constitution. It's like we've morphed into this giant welfare state. This is what disturbs me more than anything. Your thoughts on that?
In fact, countries around the world have tried it. We've seen that happen across Europe, Eastern Europe primarily, where they try to build a bigger government. The Constitution and our framers, the founding fathers of America, clearly stated that a limited government with checks and balances. The government is not there to take care of you from the cradle to the grave. It's supposed to provide you with an opportunity to succeed. And less government and government getting out of the way is the best policy that allows Americans to thrive, to reach that American dream. And what we have seen over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years is that what we're seeing is not only bigger government, but the ideas of socialism creeping into our society and individuals feeling comfortable with socialism. We know what socialism did in Eastern Europe. We know what it has done in India, for example. India practiced socialism after its independence for some 50 years, and they've actually come to the realization that it doesn't work. They're actually becoming more free market oriented, and we Americans are actually gravitating to socialism, which at the end of the day is a bankruptcy of our country. But as you've rightfully mentioned, Gerard, is that the proper role of the government is not to take care of an individual from cradle to grave. We're supposed to augment efforts that are for a limited government rather than an all-encompassing government trying to fix everyone's problems. And that's not the way the American system was designed. And it's an important message for all of us Americans. There ought to be a pushback. And I see some good signs of that with what happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where individual Virginians said, enough of this big government policy. We want to return to our roots of free enterprise, of limited government, of freedom.
And when you think about this, coupled with immigration, actually illegal immigration, which is sanctioned actually without deportation, that means that we're going to get more illegal immigrants to take advantage of a potential welfare state in America.
Yeah, and so you're probably aware that the bill proposes to eliminate the Social Security number requirement for parents and children. It used to be children that were born legally in this country as citizens just by virtue of their birth within our borders have Social Security numbers. They're entitled to these child tax credit benefits. But now they're saying you don't even need that. So it's like putting a neon sign at the border. Everybody come in here. As soon as you do sign up, we'll start sending you $300 a month per child. It just doesn't make any sense.
No. And this past year, let us be clear, this past year we had 1.7 million people that crossed illegally into the United States. And when we put that into perspective, that's more than half of the population of the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so now we're going to have a big, bright neon sign that says, we've got a greater welfare system for anyone that wants to come to take advantage of our system. And that is not America. There ought to be a national debate about where we go from here, and individual citizens should rise up in a very positive way, engaging members of Congress, their elected officials at the state level, to begin this pushback. And we must do it soon rather than later.
Joel, we got a few minutes, just a couple of minutes left here, but here over the last week, we got President Biden and Xi Jinping of China that met virtually. I don't think that accomplished anything, but more importantly, I'm not sure they actually talked about the things they should be talking about that most Americans are concerned. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. It was truly seen as really a non-productive summit. It did not achieve much at all. I think it was more of a photo opportunity with Biden and Xi Jinping sitting down at a table talking about issues. But we have to understand as Americans that the Chinese government is employing tactics that seek to influence lawmakers and public opinion. And what they want to do is to achieve favorable policies for China. And we know that China is a formidable rival. It has been considered by individuals such as John Ratcliffe as a national security threat to the United States. And what they have accomplished over the past months after basically the transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration, we have seen tremendous concerns in the South China Sea and the planes that have been taking off from China mainland, in a sense, creating great havoc for Taiwan. And even Australia, one of our greatest allies in the South Pacific. There is a trade dispute that China is actually bullying Australia, a strong ally of the United States. And it wants to basically be a part of this Trans-Pacific Trade Pact while bullying one of the members of that particular trade pact. So China is a national security threat of the United States of America. And we also have to keep in mind that during the time period when we began our trade with China, thousands of businesses left America, factories left America, and went to China. And we need to have this rebalancing that needs to take place. And America has an opportunity to create jobs here in the United States rather than exporting it to China. So one of the things that Chinese Xi Jinping did with Biden is to make it easier for more American businesses and business leaders to go visit China.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And then you got this minimum corporate tax and these other tax provisions that I think are going to cause corporations to think twice about expanding and investing in the United States. It's just upside down policy. Joel, Natasha, thanks so much for joining us today. I always appreciate your insight. You guys keep up the good fights, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much, Gerard.
Thank you. We'll be right back with Middays after this break. Stay with us.